we can just start with a little bit about your background and your journey, and how did you get to where you are today?
I've been at it a while. Um, Started in the banking business in 1973 at the Wachovia Bank and Trust Company in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And then I went back to my hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, and started a bank, and then bought some banks and sold that business. And then my brother-in-law and I put the first bank on the internet in 1995. So we did that under the bank holding company in Kentucky and spun it out to existing shareholders, took that company public. And that went quite well and had a lot of fun during the internet heyday. Then decided to start this business in 2008. So we are a specialty lender. We're about an $8 billion bank. We're the number one SBA lender in the country. We're the number one USDA lender in the country. We've made investments in a number of technology companies at the bank holding company. Then we started a private equity firm called Canopy, CANAPI. So my partner, Gene Ludwig, and dear friend, Gene is an interesting man. Gene went to Yale Law School with the Clintons and was CEO of Bankers Trust in New York, and Bill Clinton made him comptroller of the currency. So all national banks reported to him from 92 to 98. And we decided to do this together. So we raised about $700 million from 45 banks. And we have deployed about half of that in 18 fintech companies. So between the bank and our bank holding company investments in software companies and our private equity firm, which is a SBIC, Small Business Investment Corporation, we stay pretty busy around here.
That's pretty fascinating. What was that like in 1995 to be the first bank going on the internet? There was nobody to benchmark off of. What just really quickly, because I'm super curious about it. What was that like?
Well, it was early days. So my brother-in-law had a security software firm in Atlanta. So they did really technical stuff in the Unix operating system. So the launch code to the Tomahawk missile and the cruise missile, they partnered with IBM and big OEMs to help them in the kernel of the operating system. And he told me one day, he said, this internet's going to be big. This is 1993. And I said, well, what the hell's the internet? And he tried to describe it. I said, well, why don't we advertise CDs on the internet for my bank? And he said, well, you're an idiot. We ought to put Quicken on the web. So I said, well, what is Quicken, right? So we did. We hired a bunch of engineers, and we did online bill payment and stock trades and all that. When the pipe wasn't as fast as this. Remember the dial-up?
Yep.
You could ran. So we certainly had arrows in our back. Back in the day, I met with Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz fame. So he created the first browser when he was a student at the University of Illinois, supercomputer thing, and right outside of Chicago. And you remember the Mosaic browser?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. Yep.
I met with Mark and Jim Barksdale when they founded Netscape, and said, well, I want to put a bank on the internet. And they said, well, good. We'll help you do that. We'll charge you $1 million. We own the source code. So I got in a car with my brother-in-law, and I said, that sounds like a good deal. And he said, you're an idiot. We can't give them a source code. I said, well, what's the source code? So anyway, we've taken some big swings, and it's been a lot.
What is your definition of the blue economy?
Well, I think it's all about the data, right? So you'd have to have, and I've been on the UNCW board now for one meeting, so I don't know anything. But when I think about the marine biology section of UNCW, you'd want to talk to people that know what's going on out there. How are we harming this environment that we so love? Because we're Atlantic Ocean's 5 miles that way, right? And then there's always a push-pull, right? So we do want our town to grow. We are very fortunate. We're unlike any community in the United States of America. And you alluded to the sale of the hospital. So we live in the second smallest county in North Carolina, tiny little county. And of the $1.4 billion that Spence Broadhurst is responsible for in that particular fund, throwing off about $40 million of cash a year, has to be spent inside of New Hanover County. So if you added up, and I do not know what this number is, Deborah, but if you added up all the contributions to every 501c3 in Wilmington, North Carolina, I bet it's not half of that. And all of a sudden now you have $40 million in a town of 125,000 people that can be put to use. Let your mind wander on what? Childcare, 6 weeks to pre-K. We've been involved in creating a charter school for minorities. So we have built a school for primarily African-American girls, grades 6 to 12. Next year we'll be fully built out to the 12th grade. We're now the 6th grade through the 11th grade. And one of the sad things about our girls when we get them is that when we get them in the 6th grade, they're 3 grades behind. So how do you stop that, right? How do you actually get these kids earlier? There have been a lot of studies done, and it doesn't really make any difference if you can get them early or whether it's your son or daughter or my grandchildren or somebody living well below the poverty line in North Wilmington. If they are exposed to the right things at a very early age, when they're 5, they all come out together. That's what we need to figure out. So, look, it's simple. You just got to always do the right thing. Never be selfish and do the right thing. And rather this whole blue thing that you're talking about, I know nothing about, but I'd want to get the data to make sure that we did the right thing on a long-term basis. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. Yeah. Would a concept, kind of an overarching concept like blue economy or, in Wilmington help with not only focusing on what, that fund is trying to do and that foundation is trying to do, but balance all the other things that are going on, like the port growing and, the dynamic of trying to clean up the river, so it's doesn't have the pollutants that are causing cancer. And so is there a value for the community to kind of come together and have the debates and the discussion around what is our future and what do we want to be when we grow up?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes. And what I don't know is, it does seem to me, and I've not spent any time on this, Deborah, but we ought to have a consolidated view of how to grow southeastern North Carolina. I don't think that Pender County has much of an economic development force. I think Wilmington does. And I know that I think people have told me that, Brunswick across the river does their own thing. To me, if there are 250,000 people in southeastern North Carolina, there ought to be one consolidated voice on how we attract business and what type of business we want here. Obviously, I'm in the technology business. In this building behind me, we have 700 folks. The software company that we started across town has 1,200 folks. And if you just drop and take a step back, and you're an engineer, so you probably know all this, right? So there are massive changes in technology coming. I mean, most of the code that runs every bank in the country today is ancient. There are 280 billion lines of code that are sitting on servers that are not Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, or Google. All of that's going to be swapped out. In my opinion, 100% will be swapped out in the next 10 plus years, because those guys that have unlimited capital have put billions and billions and billions of dollars. So software engineers can do things faster, more safe, and more elegant. And if you look what's happened, to our business in the banking business, there are companies out there like Chime. You get your paycheck 2 days early. Affirmed, buy now, pay later. I mean, those two companies are worth $25 billion and $35 billion respectively. And if you do a stock trade on Robinhood and little confetti comes down, that company's worth $35 billion. the top 10 banks in the 10th largest bank in the country isn't worth $35 billion. So how are we going to fight back? I mean, well, we're doing it here at our bank. We're doing it at Encino across town. Could there be 100 companies here in Wilmington to do that? I don't know. You want to commute from Greenwich, Connecticut into New York City, or do you want to write code in Wilmington? We are incredibly unique in this town to have had, until 6 months ago, the largest privately owned hospital in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And now we ought to figure out how to step it up and do it right, to bring in the right industries to make sure that we continue to grow and have fun.
How do you bring in that talent? Is that talent for the technology that you have the 700 people that are coding? And I mean, because that's a competitive field for that talent. Are they kids that went to the university that are staying at home, staying in the area and raising their families, and or are you trying to attract from outside, or both?
Yeah, very much both. Between Encino and Live Oak, we have probably hired, I'm guessing, probably 400 UNCW graduates. But that also gets back to the business model and what's unique about my bank or what's unique about that company. I mean, we started this business in '08. We started Encino in 2012. This business is worth $2.5 billion and Encino's worth $8 billion. And that was started by people in Wilmington. So that's a whole lot of capital to take care of your family. So if you paint the target properly and you have the right mission and you can continue to grow organically, then you build a great business. We've been able to do that in both companies.
When you think about the Wilmington and the greater Wilmington area, and you think 15, 20 years out, what does it look like? What do you hope it looks like?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that we are just so blessed to do this right. If you think about the ocean on one end, you think about the river on the other end, let's just stick with Wilmington and New Hanover County, right? There's not much land left. There's just not, and it's controlled by several families. How do we control that development in the right way? How do we attract and retain the type of talent like at our bank, right? So the average age at our bank is 29 and the average salary is over $100,000. So what is the multiplier effect of that? Same thing with Encino across town. If we can continue to incubate businesses like this, primarily in the technology area,
What is your greatest hope for the future?
I think it's an extension of this conversation, right? If we can be because of the foundation, the extra capital, where we can actually make these investments in the future with the right people, then it's almost like utopia to me, because this is such a beautiful place with such a beautiful setting, from the river to the beaches to this or to that. And all of a sudden you wake up and now we have 20 companies like the one that I started here in the software company. Now you've really done something. And typically I would say that hope is not a strategy, right? You got to have some data to make some real decisions. And what are we going to do by Friday? What are we going to do by the end of the quarter? What are we going to do by the end of the year? And put the right people with passion in charge, because that's what it takes. That's how you actually win. So whatever those issues are, from banking to technology to blue this to UNCW that, you got to have the right people in charge.
Do you think you have the right people in charge?
I think this is a very unique place.
Yeah.
I've lived in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Atlanta and Kentucky and other places. And this is a unique place. This is a very, very friendly town. In Atlanta, Georgia, during the heyday, all people wanted to talk about is, what's your net worth? Most of the people around here kind of want to know about your children and what church do you go to and can I be of help? It's very refreshing.